Good morning, everyone. I'm the Reverend William Levwood, the minister here at the Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. My pronouns are he, him, and his. As we begin our service this morning, I invite you to close your other apps and devices, to take a deep breath and center yourself for worship. We begin by calling forth the ancestors and descendants. We call forth the ancestors, the people who made each of us, our biological ancestors, spiritual ancestors, teachers, and guides. We call forth those who imagined and made this congregation possible and who have sustained it up to this present day. And we open and welcome. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. And we seek healing. We seek healing with the people of this land, those whose bodies and spirits live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomeck Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. With this, let us open to the longings and the hopes of all the descendants of all nations, so that we might live for them today, honoring the ancestors as we move toward healing, so that all the descendants together shall one day know full justice. As we light our chalice this morning, we're going to try something just slightly different. I know how important the beautiful words of the Reverend David Bumbaugh, the community blessing that we normally say at the end of this service, are to so many of you in this congregation. And so I'd like to invite you for our chalice lighting words to actually say those words with me this morning. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars.
We welcome you to the Accotink Unitarian Universalist worship. I'm Jim Gerard, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. Accotink UU Church is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. All are welcome here in this justice-seeking, earth-healing community of faith. You are welcome no matter who you love, no matter your identity or heritage, no matter your beliefs or background, no matter your means or abilities, you are welcome here in this religious community. If you're new to Accotink and would like to talk more about the church, please be sure to reach out to me, Reverend William Levwood, or one of our greeters using the chat box. Our website, www.accotinkuu.org, you can check the online order service in the worship section. While you are on the website, be sure to check out our events page for the upcoming virtual gatherings and other news. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our virtual coffee hour immediately after service. We are so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Sankofa Read Aloud. Today's story is titled, V is for Voting. Written by Kate Farrell, illustrated by Caitlin Kuwald. I hope that you enjoy this amazing story. A is for active participation. B is for building a more equal nation. C is for citizens' rights and our duty. D is for difference, our strength and our beauty. E is for engagement, We all need to care. F is for a free press to find facts and share. G is for govern, to lead and to guide. H is for homelands that we've occupied. I is for inching ahead, bit by bit. The march is a long one, but we cannot quit. J is for judges. They're meant to be fair, to be neutral, unbiased, objective, they swear. K is for knowing that you can take part. L is for local, and that's where you start. M is for matter, and every vote does. N is for never forgetting what was. O is for onward, keep progress in sight. P is for protest, when we need to fight. Q is for questions. I've got 1 or 3. R is for represent. They work for me. S is for suffrage, the right to a vote. This fight is ongoing, not history's footnote. T is for talented teachers in schools. Well-informed citizens don't suffer fools. U is for unbought, unbossed, undeterred. V is voting to make your voice heard. W is for working for change, win or lose. X marks the spot on the ballot you choose. Y is for you. We need everyone's hand. Z is for zeal. Please bring yours. Take a stand.
Our reading this morning is from poet and cultural critic Hanif Abdurraqib from his book of interconnected essays, A Little Devil in America, Notes in Praise of Black Performance. In 2006, the movie The Prestige was released based on a 1995 novel of the same name by Christopher Priest. In both the movie and the novel, the magic trick is deconstructed into 3 parts. The pledge, you are shown an object that appears ordinary, a deck of cards, a bird, the body of a living person. You, perhaps craving the feeling of being fooled, might haphazardly inspect the object to see whether it is unaltered, ignoring the signs suggesting that it really is. Next, the turn. The ordinary object because or does the extraordinary right before your eyes. The deck of cards dissolves into shreds, or the bird calmly vanishes into the folds of a scarf, or the body becomes a doorway through which you can enter and find yourself absorbed upon exiting. Finally, there is the prestige, simply the moment when the extraordinary something returns to an ordinary state, but in a slightly altered form. From underneath a palm, the cards reform into a tumbling parade of bright red hearts, the black card you picked resting right in the middle. The bird explodes from within the folded scarf, but this time the bird is a cardinal or a dove or something more fluorescent than the death dark feathers of the crow. The body, of course, appears somewhere different than it once was. Somewhere it can be briefly useful again for the sake of an audience in awe, then forgotten until it can perform the next trick.
The assault on our Capitol on January 6th, 2021, just 1 year ago this week, was a terrifying moment of extremist violence. It was both a real and present threat to our democracy and a spectacle that threatens to distract us from the even greater threats to our democracy. The rally that led to the insurrection was called the Rally to Stop the Steal, referring to the lie, what's been called the big lie, that the 2020 presidential election was fraudulent, a claim that has been disproven so many times, it feels ridiculous to me that I feel the need to say that there's absolutely no evidence to support it and ample evidence to disprove it. I shouldn't even have to say that. It's so clear. The explanation put forth that the insurrection was an aberrant act of a few far-right radicals, that explanation fails to hold accountable the mainstream politicians who supported it and continue to promote lies about the 2020 election. And focusing too much on the spectacle of the insurrection also threatens to distract us from the continued threats to our democracy, many of which have existed for a long time, all of which have only gotten worse since January 6th of 2020. As poet and essayist and culture critic Hanif Abdurraqib shares with us in our reading, magic tricks have three parts: the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. I submit to you that right now a sleight of hand magic trick is being performed before our very eyes, and we need to pay attention so that we can stop the real stealing of our democracy, not by fringe radicals, but by mainstream politicians. What if the pledge in this magic trick is the big lie? The lie that the election has been stolen from Donald Trump, this ridiculous and debunked claim, has nevertheless convinced a significant portion of American citizens, not a majority, but a significant minority of our fellow citizens, everyday people who are contributing positively to our society as doctors and nurses, teachers and tow truck drivers, real estate agents and airline pilots, police officers, firefighters. People from every walk of life have fallen prey to this lie. And in doing so, these everyday Americans, normal in every other way, productive citizens, good people, have been dangerously radicalized. The turn in this magic trick is the insurrection itself. The Stop the Steal rally, the power of the big lie made real, with body-painted wackos dressed in furs, roving the halls of our Capitol, attacking and injuring police officers, almost capturing and violently attacking our representatives. This is the turn, the distraction in the magic trick that keeps us, the audience, from seeing the sleight of hand that conceals the truth that once revealed, it'll be too late to stop the magic because it will have already happened. That's the prestige. That's the final part of the magic trick. The prestige is the moment when we find our democracy has actually been stolen from us, but not by the Democratic Party as claimed by the big lie, not even by the Proud Boys or any other far-right extremist group. Democracy is being threatened to be stolen from us by certain members of the Republican Party who are deeply divisive and who are actively engaging in stealing our democracy while telling us it's being stolen from them. In many ways, the January 6th insurrection is a foil that draws our attention to a small group of far-right extremists so that while we're preoccupied with that very real threat of domestic terrorism, mainstream politicians can continue working to systematically steal our democracy through an organized campaign to subvert and sabotage future elections. This campaign includes new voter suppression laws in multiple states across the country, a renewed commitment to partisan gerrymandering, efforts to wrest control of election certification from election officials and give it to partisan legislatures, or to put into office election officials who vowed not to certify elections if their candidate doesn't win. This is a national push that enables partisan politicians to distort democratic outcomes. And they do it in the name of protecting us from election fraud that doesn't actually exist. In the name of that false fraud, these politicians are working to give themselves the power to commit election fraud. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, in multiple state legislatures, extreme gerrymandering alone, just one of their tactics, could distort our democracy for the next decade, just as maps drawn with partisan bias after the 2010 census skewed elections in 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020. An editorial in The Guardian warns us, in fact, that state legislatures are constructing an election stealing machine, warning us that the 6th of January was not an end, but a beginning. Trumpeting the rallying cry that the threat to American democracy may be greater today than when the insurrectionist mob swept into the US Capitol 1 year ago. And while the threat of future violence is real, with a significant number of Americans so radicalized that they're even willing to engage in violence to overthrow our democracy. Even though that threat is real, arguably, according to some of America's leading political scientists, we're in danger of a slide to Hungarian-style competitive authoritarianism in which the trappings of elections remain, but elections are so rigged that Democrats cannot win. Do you see the irony and the deception at the heart of this sleight of hand magic trick? That the very Republicans claiming that there is fraud at the core of our democratic institutions are the same actors who are engaging in anti-democratic maneuvers to steal future elections. It's like the thief who, when the police arrives, points at someone else and claims that person committed the robbery. So I think this explains how the big lie threatens to distract us from the greater dangers to our democracy. But why are so many Americans falling for it? That's the magic trick behind the magic trick. I contend that the big lie that the presidential election was stolen is built on the biggest lie of all, the lie of white supremacy. In 1990, when I was 14 years old, the rap group Public Enemy released the album Fear of a Black Planet. I remember listening to it as I delivered newspapers door to door, the cassette nestled into my Walkman, pumping the beats and socio-political commentary into my ears through my headphones. Fear of a Black Planet poetically and prophetically narrated white America's fear that Black people would take over the planet. A potentially terrifying future if you're a member of a soon-to-be minority that has been terrorizing the soon-to-be majority for centuries. According to the latest census projections, Barton Gellman shares with us in The Atlantic, according to the latest census projections, white Americans will become a minority nationally in the United States by the year 2045. Fear of a Black Planet will have recently celebrated its 50th anniversary, and like the Beatles song, I'll be 64 years old when that happens. Barton Gellman also shares the academic spin to Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet, explaining The Great Replacement theory is the latest incarnation of a racist trope that dates back to Reconstruction in the United States. Replacement ideology holds that a hidden hand, often imagined as Jewish, is encouraging the invasion of non-white immigrants and the rise of non-white citizens to take power from white Christian people of European stock. Gelman continues reminding us that just 2 hours away by car from where we are right now, when white supremacists marched with torches in Charlottesville in 2017, they chanted, "Jews will not replace us." In a study of Americans who've been labeled committed insurrectionists, defined as those who not only believe the big lie that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Donald Trump, but are also willing to take up arms to violently overthrow the supposedly illegitimate government, almost 2/3 of those committed insurrectionists agreed that African-American people or Hispanic people in our country will eventually have more rights than whites. And after looking at multiple demographic features, this was the only, I repeat, the only common denominator researchers found among this group of committed insurrectionists. In other words, respondents who believed in the Great Replacement theory, regardless of their views on anything else, were nearly 4 times as likely as those who did not to support the violent removal of the president. So what can we do? What can we do to protect our democracy? I mentioned that our Time for All Ages today might seem simple and therefore seem like it has little to say to us as adults, especially to adults facing such grave threats to our democracy. But I believe if we take a closer look, it actually presents us with a clear guide to protecting our democracy. I want to lift up just a little bit of that clear guide. Despite being called V is for voting, only 3 letters in that book focus on voting. The book begins by telling us that A is for active participation, and it includes 6 more letters calling for our active participation in our democracy, counseling us that we all need to care, to take part, to lend a hand, to take a stand, to protest, and to do all of this with zeal, with enthusiasm, with commitment and steadfast dedication. Research by Erica Chenoweth, a political scientist at Harvard University, working with Maria Steffen, a researcher at the ICNC, they performed research that included an extensive review of the literature on civil resistance and social movements from 1900 to 2006. They collected data from 323 violent and nonviolent campaigns. And what they found not only supports the wisdom of that picture book about how important our active participation is, but it might surprise you. They found that nonviolent protests are twice as likely to succeed as armed conflicts. And those nonviolent efforts that engage a threshold of 3.5% of the population, just 3.5% of the population committed to showing up consistently in resistance, have never failed to bring about change. Known as the 3.5% rule, it's been true of the most successful campaigns to take down authoritarian regimes, including the People Power movement in the Philippines that brought down the Marcos regime, the Singing Revolution in Estonia in the late 1980s, and the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2003. The big lie, and even the organized subversion and sabotage of our democracy won't succeed as long as we're willing to show up in large numbers in opposition to its false claims and anti-democratic policies. And what about the ongoing threat of white supremacy to our democratic ideals and the dream of equality and justice in America? Again, I find that our picture book gives us compelling vision for our future and a guide for how to get there. The letter B, we're told, is for building a more equal nation. And 5 more letters refer to the journey of building this more equal nation, advising us to never forget what was, to keep focused on future progress, to engage in a fight that is ongoing, a march that is long and needs our continued commitment. 3 more letters remind us how important it is to have an informed citizenry in order that understands our history and our ideals. The big lie is predicated on the foundational lie at the heart of the American project, the lie of white supremacy. That's a lie that isn't going away overnight. It's the root of the problem. And right now, we do need to be mobilizing to counter the very real and present danger of losing our democracy to authoritarian rule. But at the same time, we also need to throw our energy behind the ongoing process of transforming America to live up to our democratic ideals. There is much cause for hope if we're willing to mobilize ourselves. Remember that those who are attempting to steal our democracy need to steal it, because if they play fair, democracy is winning. Author of the groundbreaking book, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander, reminds us that every time there has been even the appearance of racial progress, there has been a severe backlash. As Van Jones termed it, a white lash. This has happened over and over again throughout our history. After the Civil War, we saw that backlash that helped to birth convict leasing. After Reconstruction, we saw the backlash that undid Reconstruction and the birth of Jim Crow laws. And following the formal dismantling of the old Jim Crow by a courageous civil rights, human rights, Black freedom struggle movement, we saw a backlash yet again that manifested as a get tough and law and order movement that helped to birth mass incarceration in the United States, end quote. The only reason extremists are being emboldened to attack our democracy, while behind the scenes, barely concealed, people are quietly, peacefully even, but not less dangerously, dismantling the very foundations of our democracy. The only reason these things are happening is because a majority of people believe in building a more equal nation with dignity, equity, justice, and compassion for all. The rally to stop the steal that led to the insurrection on January 6th was attended by thousands of people. But the Women's March on January 21st, just 4 years earlier, was attended by 3 to 5 million people. Thousands of people at the Stop the Steal rally, 3 to 5 million people at the Women's March. And polls suggest that 15 to 26 million people participated in Black Lives Matter protests throughout June of 2020. That's well over the 11 million that constitutes 3.5% of the American electorate. We have the power. We just need to show up and use it. I'll leave you with these words from Michelle Alexander, and may this vision that she puts forth of an America that is in the process of emerging be a call to action for us to mobilize with resolute commitment, gathering together the power of the majority of Americans who share our dedication to democracy to bring about the beloved community. Michelle Alexander says this: a new nation is struggling to be born, a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-faith, egalitarian democracy in which every life and every voice truly matters. In recent years, we've seen glimpses of this new nation at Standing Rock, in the streets of Ferguson, in the eyes of the dreamers, in the voices of teenagers from Parkland and Chicago, as well as at LGBT pride celebrations, the Women's March, and the camps of Occupy Wall Street. Confederate statues are coming down as new memorials and statues are going up in Montgomery, Alabama and beyond, honoring victims of lynching, as well as the courageous souls who fought for the abolition of slavery and the end of Jim Crow. She tells us that if we pause long enough to consider where we stand in relationship to the centuries-long quest to create a truly equitable democracy, we may be able to see that the revolutionary river that brought us this far just might be the only thing that could possibly carry us to a place where we all belong. I say, may it be so, and may we be among those who make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Though we will extinguish our chalice flame, we will carry within us what we kindled, the light of inspiration, warmth, and of compassion, the fire of commitment. May we bring these gifts into our lives and share them radiantly out into the world.
I leave you with these closing words from Erica Chenoweth, the author of the study I mentioned in the sermon. She reminds us that nonviolent resistance does not happen overnight or automatically. It requires an informed and prepared public, keen to the strategy and dynamics of its political power. And although nonviolent campaigns often begin with a committed and experienced core, successful ones enlarge the diversity of participants, maintain nonviolent discipline, and expand the types of nonviolent actions they use. They constantly increase their base of supporters, build coalitions, leverage social networks, and generate connections with those in the opponent's network who may be ambivalent about cooperating with oppressive policies. And crucially, she tells us, crucially, nonviolent resistance works not by melting the heart of the opponent, but by constraining their options. May we commit to participating, to active participation. A is for active participation in this nonviolent movement for the kind of democracy that we believe in, that upholds our values. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so.